The Mazda 3 is a beauty which left me speechless the moment I got to see it in person. And then I drove it, which made me even more excited.
I'm sorry about the shades, but it is so bright I would just be squinting all the time. Anyway, the Mazda 3. We've tested this car in a couple different versions already, with the 120 horsepower petrol or gas engine and with the X engine. So that was quite interesting, but now this one has the 150 horsepower gas engine, which should be a little bit more lively than the 121. And I also have to say, I love this soul red color. Look how nice it is. Look at the transitions between the darks and the brights. It's really lovely.
Not really sure what else to say here. Something beautiful doesn't need advertising. Even though Mazdas don't have a huge selection of alloys, the ones they do are really nice. The lovely exterior is standard, of course, but I do prefer the rear of the 5-door to that of the 4-door version. LED lights are a little different to the general design of competitors, which adds even more character. Mazda and the rest of the Japanese cars are a bit late introducing fully digital instruments though. On the other hand, they fortunately aren't throwing all physical controls into the trash bin either.
You know, whenever I hear that I'll be driving or testing a Mazda, I get quite excited, because they are just very, very nice cars to drive. You think I'm biased? Sure. I mean, go drive one yourself, and you'll be biased as well. No, but seriously, they are just very, very, very good. And with the latest generations of Mazdas, they are also extremely pretty to look at. I mean, my mother, who is not a car guy, well, she's not a guy at all, but she's not someone who's interested in cars at all. She does not care about acceleration and cornering and driving assists or LEDs or any of the technology. She just wants a car to be comfortable and perhaps luxurious. And as soon as she saw the Mazda 3, she said, "What a pretty car." And specifically because she's not interested in cars at all, I think that says a lot about this vehicle. So I'm not going to go deep into why the Mazda or the Mazda 3 is such a nice car to drive. I've already tested it many times with different engines, and this test is sort of just going to be focusing on the engine itself, because I've tested it with, I believe, a diesel, a gas engine, the 120 horsepower one. I've tested it with the X engine, which was quite interesting, and now I'm testing it for the first time with the 150 horsepower 2-liter naturally aspirated gas engine. So Mazda is quite an interesting manufacturer, because they do a lot of refining. The whole Skyactiv idea and technology that I was talking about quite a while ago is about reducing weight, making things better, refining them. And they're also very interested in the fact that they shy away from turbos, with the exception of their diesel engines, of course, and with the 2.5-liter turbo engines in the Mazda 6, which is only available, I think, in the North American market and some others. So this has a 2-liter naturally aspirated gas engine, but having said that, it doesn't feature a turbo, but when you put your foot down, yeah, it delivers power old school, not in one big lump, but it is relentless. So like I said before many times, these cars, we're not actually used to driving non-turbo engines anymore, at least over here in Europe. Probably more in North America, but here in Europe, we're not really used to not having power surge all of a sudden and having a little bit of turbo lag, even though they're, doing better nowadays. But yeah, we're used to a giant surge of power and torque, and we're just not used to this old schoolness anymore of power just being always available, but not as much. And I have to say, having driven a 1.8-liter gas Mondeo for quite a while, I kind of miss that feeling. I kind of miss the fact that you have all this rev range without turbo lag, but with reasonable torque. It's nice. There's another consequence of not having a turbo, of course, is that you will have to shift a lot more. You will have to have the engine in higher RPMs if you want a lot of power. But here's the really cool thing. Unlike in the olden days, where you really had to thrash an engine, this one is actually quite happy, sitting at about 1100 to, let's say, 1500 RPMs. And see, I'm in third, let's go to fourth, it says, and I'm at 1100 RPM. And if I put my foot just about a third down, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47 kilometers an hour, I mean, it's actually surprisingly torquey down low, despite the fact that it's not a diesel and it doesn't have a turbo to spool up. Of course, it would have to be a tiny turbo to spool up at those RPMs, but still, it is actually a pretty nice thing that, it's because the engine is not small, it's a 2-liter engine, and there's no turbo to have the lag. Now, my colleague says that the car doesn't feel overly great at higher speeds when cornering because of the rear suspension. I really haven't taken the car to the limit, but I've driven it a little spirited in corners, and it feels good to me. It feels planted, but of course I wasn't taking it to the limit, so take that with a grain of salt, perhaps. So what about acceleration? Well, we're going about 35. Let's put it into second. There's a really cool stork over there, which I cannot show you, unfortunately. Let's put our foot down. 40, 50, 60, 70, still in second, 80, 90. And I wasn't even up to 6,000. So this engine is very revvy, or rev happy, and it is quite torquey. Now, I would be lying if I could tell you the difference between the 120 horsepower and this one. I believe they are mechanically identical. It's just the software that's different. That's why some people were saying that you can actually chip these or reprogram the ECU if you have the 120 horsepower one and get this one. But like I said, I'm not advocating that. You do that at your own risk. But yeah, it's really difficult to tell you if there's any difference in the feeling of power. I would have to have both of those cars side by side, sit into one, accelerate, then get into the other one and do the same thing to actually tell you. But more power is always nice, especially if you like driving. more acceleration, better opportunities when overtaking, and so on and so forth. And at the end of the day, if you have more power, you usually can also have less fuel consumption, unless you have some crazy engine with 700 horsepower. So what about fuel consumption? This is a big one, because what manufacturers have been doing in the recent years is downsizing, something Mazda has not been doing, and they've called it right-sizing. So the right engine for the right car. So most of their cars, at least here in Europe, had a 2-liter or have a 2-liter engine. I think only the Mazda 2 has a smaller one. Let's leave the diesels out of it, but I'm talking about the gas ones, the naturally aspirated ones. So the really interesting thing is that most of the manufacturers have gone to smaller, exclusively turbocharged engines, whether they are diesel ones or gas ones. But Mazda shied away from that and just stayed with a 2-liter naturally aspirated gas engine, and that's it. And I'm actually really surprised with what they managed to do with both power, torquiness, response, and yet fuel economy. So I think in this car, more than any others that are turbocharged, you can actually see the real difference, unless we're talking about a Megane RS or something like that, but you can really see the difference between eco and sporty driving. Usually there's only like a liter or something of a difference, and here there's quite a big one. So if you're driving this car on the freeway or the motorway a lot and you put your foot down, well, we got it to almost 8 liters per 100 kilometers. So quite thirsty. But that's because if you want to overtake at higher speeds with a naturally aspirated engines, you will have to shift down a lot and have it in very high RPMs for a lot of the time to get that power out. But when you're actually driving economically and in the city, this engine and the gearbox, they're just fantastic. I love them. And it's very nice. You never feel like you're out of power or something. And I actually got this car down to 4.8 liters per 100 kilometers with a 2-liter naturally aspirated engine. And I believe that if I were to stop doing all of this accelerating and stuff, I could get it to maybe even a little bit below 4.8. So I was actually truly really surprised by how low it got. Now that wasn't exactly city driving, that was constant driving at around 50 kilometers per hour through some intersections and so on, and yeah, that is a good result. So in the end, do I miss a turbo? The answer is yes and no. Yes, because sometimes you would like a bit more of that kick, a bit of that lump of power, but that's subjective, because over here we drive so many turbo cars that you're just used to that, and if there's none of that lump of power and torque, all of a sudden you're thinking something's wrong, because like I said, we're not used to these naturally aspirated engines anymore. But at the same time, I don't want it because the engine is just so nice, because in any rev range almost, you've got plenty of torque and power, unless you want to drive really sportily or overtake, of course, then you have to downshift. But I really like it, and it's just, like I said, lovely to drive, especially with a six-gear manual gearbox, which is just so lovely to shift gears in. And as we've seen, the engine can be also very economical.
The 150 horsepower Mazda 3 starts at 25,590 euros. For the automatic version and practically all the extras, you'll be paying just over 30,000 euros.